you, and I'm very excited to hear what you have to share with us. Before we dive in, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you to Edge One Media, who is our quarter one technology sponsor. Thank you, Edge One. Got their little logo up here. Hello. And so what I'd love to do to get us started is really to dive right in. And what I'm going to ask of each of you panelists is you can all unmute your mics. I would love for this to be an opportunity for you to cross-share if the need arises. I will be going through the questions that I provided to you sort of in order, and I can kind of guide us along the way if you're feeling like you don't want to jump in or you'd like to be asked to speak. Either one of those works for me. So the first question that I have for you will really be, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and then answer us a short piece of information. So if you don't mind sharing your name, your business or your community organization, and what you do there. And once you've done that, it would be great if you could let us know in about 90 seconds, which I know is a challenge. Could you sum up for us your leadership strategy over this past year? And I'm going to kick it off with Debbie Molehan with the Tigard Chamber of Commerce. Debbie, tell us.
Hey, I'm Debbie Molehan. I'm the CEO of the Tigard Chamber. So my role is to lead this organization with our business community and with my great team that I have. So I would say my leadership strategy has been many pronged in the last year. One has been way more communication than normal to both staff, board, as well as our membership base. I've always been a pretty transparent and inclusive leader with staff, as I think that leads to better, more informed decision-making for their piece of the business, but really expanded that as we navigated this new normal together. So really sharing both good news and bad news at times, but fact-based, because I think that helps remove fear. We can actually talk about what could happen within reason and then how to address that. So really also increased transparency in terms of shared realities and frustration, what was going on. Did a lot more group brainstorming with staff and particularly with the board early on. Shared my personal story, like how am I navigating everything that's going on, and then did check-ins with the team in particular to see how they were navigating. And then I think with all of us encouraging movement versus stalling out or being paralyzed, because I think the starter was kind of like, wow, I can't believe it's happening. And it's easier to change direction when you are moving. So make your best decision with the info you have at the time and then adjust. And then just really being a clearinghouse and summarizing and netting a large inflow. So those were kind of all my leadership strategies the last year.
Thank you, Debbie. To dovetail into that, I'd love to go to Kevin Bates with Symposium Coffee, who's also a local business leader.
Yes, thank you. We're actually roommates in the same building as the Tigard Chamber. So we're glad to be here. My name is Kevin Bates. I own Symposium Coffee. We have the two locations, one here in Tigard and one in Sherwood. We've been in existence for about 10 years. And so we've navigated through a lot of different things. Of course, 2020 was much different for everybody. And what I found in the last year is my leadership style definitely took a dramatic shift to, just like Debbie said, I'll dovetail on that, hyper communicative and what I'll call calculated risk versus assumption-based communication or uncalculated risk, which I would say is just kind of a lazy communication style. So moving to a very disciplined communication style. And I think the reason that I picked up on that really soon, that I needed to be very specific in my communication, was the environment was very unstable. And early on, people literally felt like maybe their worlds were coming to an end as they knew it. They became very unstable. And so I witnessed and experienced a lot of obscure reactions and what I'll call runoff conclusions about certain things. And so things became very non-fact based. And so trying to move towards fact-based realities. So one of the things that I determined is I needed to become a voice of stability. And even though I was actually probably had some instability of my own reactions going on the inside, I needed to be a voice of reason and stability to our community, to our staff and the people around me. So the only way that I have ever known how to do that in crisis is to lean on and seek modeling from my mentors and finding basically a new set of mentors that I could get advice from or learn from, a sense of stability, those that have gone through major crises before in their history. So that's what I'll term as followership. Instead of leadership, I really engaged in a discipline of followership. I believe that we're never able to lead effectively unless we're able to follow effectively. So for me, 2020 was a time and an opportunity for mentorship through some spiritual mentors, but also two very seasoned business mentors that I acquired and also were given just by good luck. And also people who cared about me put these people in my life. They helped me lead my staff. They helped me lead through crisis, the changes that I needed to make. And so I would say that the key point for my leadership change and my pivot in leadership style to become an effective leader, I had to become an effective follower. So putting key people in place that I can model after and bring a sense of stability in voice, at least, that I could be a sense of reason that people could lean on as I was leaning on that sense of reason as well.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate your insights in there, and not just how you turned to lead, but also how you figured out how to lead from within too. I appreciate this panel because we're going to switch gears a little bit and kind of hear leadership strategies from a community perspective that's a little different, because Debbie and Kevin are certainly within the business community and lead in a different way than Mayor Snyder or Dr. Sue or Cassandra with TVFNR. So with that, Mayor Snyder, can I connect with you to share with us who you are, what you do, and in 90 seconds, sum up your leadership strategy in this past year?
I will do my best. That is a big challenge. My name is Jason Snyder, and I am the mayor of Tigard. And in my, probably many know what my role would be on some level, and there's not enough time in my 90 seconds to go through that, but I will talk about my leadership strategy in the past year. And for those that know me, transparency is absolutely at the heart of my leadership style. And there's some reasons why. I think in the last year, it's clear people have been hurting. They've needed help, they've needed information, and they didn't always know where to look and who to trust. And as local government, we have a responsibility to help those that are hurting and looking for information. And we met that responsibility as best we could by being transparent, both as a city and me as mayor, particularly related to COVID and community, supporting the community during COVID. Our entire community was impacted. They were looking for help anywhere they could. They looked to the city for help. We've been transparent in sharing how we've been able to help and what resources we could connect people to, and or what information we could share that was trusted. We've been transparent in how we've distributed our grant funding to the community. We did connect 320 Tigard businesses with COVID funding. 38% of those businesses were entrepreneurs of color. We shared the stories of those businesses who received funding and how they used it to keep their doors open. We worked with the businesses that didn't receive Tigard funding to connect them with other resources, which we think is really important and part of our role. It's not just about what we can do, but also who we can connect other people to. Just in the last 24 hours sent something to CEO Molehan about an opportunity that she wasn't aware of, that she'll help get information about. So we're constantly trying to do those things. And then the other major thing our community was grappling with, and the entire country, was the response to the George Floyd murder. And in the aftermath of that, more than 500 community members shared their concerns and questions with me about public safety and policing in Tigard. We answered each of those questions and shared the answers on our communications platforms. This included sharing police policy and data and information. Both Chief McAlpine and I hosted multiple online chats to talk directly with the community and answer questions. And this is really important, we did not dodge or deflect any questions. We've just answered as best we can. That was also my style after our recent officer-involved shooting. We don't have anything to hide. I have no reason to not be as transparent as I can be. And if I have the answer, I'll share it. And if I don't, I'll explain what I know and why. We heard the community's input board. which has been, by far the most transparent process that I think the city's ever created, where any community member could apply. We had an unprecedented amount of interest in that. 39 applications were received, and a virtual caucus narrowed that down to 16 that the council then chose from. So that's what leadership on some fronts has looked like for me in the last year, touching on a few points.
Thank you, Mayor Snyder. I just want to pull out a theme that I'm noticing so far in the conversation, and you said it really well, which is transparency. And I would encourage you to add that takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of accountability, which I think you really touched on in how you do your process, how you are transparent, and then what that process looks like. Dr. Sue, our school superintendent, who I'm sure has had a lot to consider and to support the community on this year. Will you share with us some about your leadership in this last
Certainly,
year?
Catherine, and thank you. I would certainly build off of what the mayor has offered into the space. I have always led as an adaptive leader, meaning that it's very easy to do the technical things, to be able to check the box, but adaptive leaders are ones that have a very clear vision and mission, very clear North Star, so that regardless of whether you are in crisis or whether you are in times in which decision-making is easy, that doesn't change, it doesn't shift, it's not situational. I would also reinforce what the mayor has shared relative to transparency. The challenge has been in the current conditions, because from Oregon Health Authority, that literally has changed in some cases hour by hour, how accurate our information is at any given point in time. And so it's about making sure that our community understands the fluidity, at the same time being anchored into our primary mission, which is educating every child. And so I lead in a way that I believe that needs to be distributed. I believe that I'm not, while I am the chief organizer, I am not the only leader. And then it's important for me to hear all perspectives, not just from staff that belong to Tigard Tualatin, but most certainly from our community as well. And I want to say thank you for the partnerships that we've been able to forge with the Chamber and with the City of Tigard in terms of convening people and grappling with some of these really large social issues, such as immediately after the murder of George Floyd and the question relative to SROs. I also believe that communication needs to be even more amplified. Again, Kevin brought that forward, because people, as things become fluid, they feel that their anchor is lost. And so giving them just-in-time information becomes even more critical. And we'll certainly speak, if we have time today, about the multiplicity of ways in which we have changed our strategies to provide that kind of flexibility. Additionally, I'm coming from healthcare background. I know that when people are stressed, that is the time when they need touch and care even more so. And so I also lead from a position of high stress, high touch. And it's not just our students, but our students' families, the communities in which our families live, our staff, our city partners and others. How do we provide care and consideration while we are solving these problems and moving forward together? And so I feel that that is also a responsibility of my leadership, is to demonstrate that care for others and thought, and a recognition of what walk they may be doing at the same time that we're trying to do our walk. So staying focused to the mission, communicating, over communicating in many cases, caring for others, and
Thank you, Sue. I appreciate very much how you really nailed partnership in that. I think this is an excellent opportunity, our convening today, and specifically having all of you available on the call to talk on this topic. Cassandra, crises in this past year, many that we were not expecting, I think, as a whole community. share with us, how's that experience been for you?
Absolutely. So I am speaking on partly behalf of our fire chief, Chief Weiss, who had only been our fire chief for a matter of months. So this was a whole new paradigm for us. While we had dabbled in pandemic response with Ebola and H1N1, this was next level, right? So we basically felt like we had to start over from scratch. And I love Debbie started right out the gate. So I feel like I'm going to plagiarize from all of these eloquent speakers that communication was a key factor for us. And we have so many personnel, you know, they got into the fire service because they have a level of fearlessness and also a sense of compassion and empathy for the community. I think in the almost 23 years I've been in the fire service, this was one of the first times that you could feel some palpable fear amongst our personnel. And so one of the biggest challenges was balancing that directive that we had to really rise to one of the biggest challenges we would ever, if not the biggest challenge we would face collectively as an organization, while also recognizing that our personnel were afraid and the families of our personnel were afraid. And so Chief Weiss has always had a mantra of kindness. And while that might sound less tough and glamorous as, you know, for fire service personnel, it really is a reframe for us to be kind to each other, and that constant communication, that reminder to be kind and be good to one another, and to recognize that we were under that duress, and to acknowledge that fear, but then translate that fear into action. And it really galvanizing around our shared mission to be there for our community. That was a good thing for us. And so we did have the benefit from a leadership perspective of knowing that we have a system that we manage every single emergency, whether it's wildfire, earthquake, or a pandemic. We do benefit from having a really solid incident command structure. So from a leadership perspective, you do have that backbone to rely upon, but then doing the interconnecting constantly, both with our personnel, the families of our personnel, so that we are best equipped to serve our community, but then also translating that into reassurance for our community and being accountable and demonstrating to them what we're doing to be sure that we can care for them properly. For us, and I know we're going to talk a little later about communication, we made a conscious decision, right, to wear what looks like hazardous material suits to everybody. And that was good for our personnel from the standpoint that they felt more protected and they had that reassurance. It was very frightening to members of our community who were also experiencing that collective fear. So we had to balance that communication. From a leadership style, it took a lot of reminders, a lot of emphasis of what our mission was and what we had to do. So there were many times that we had to say, hey, we're going to be running a marathon, but you're going to have to run it at a sprint pace. So it's okay to express your frustration. It's okay for us to be tired, but you know, we have to check ourselves. So there was a lot more care and nurturing amongst each other. And I think that translated to some of the leadership approaches, and then just constantly reinforcing what we were going to do to get through it, and still continue to do that now that we've transitioned to vaccines. So communication was key. The mental health and acknowledging that, which has not always been an easy thing for first responders to acknowledge how important mental health was, and then really just making sure that we were there for our community when they were struggling. So I appreciate what the mayor said about that accountability and also the tension. We experienced the same tensions internally with the racial injustice movements and things like that. And so we had to have a lot of really critical conversations and remind folks that politics is set aside, and really reinforcing our shared mission to get through these times.
Well, and I appreciate too that you've touched on that we're not out of this yet. You know, crisis, and Dr. Sue, you mentioned this too, leadership can look the same. There are qualities that can look the same whether we're in crisis or not. I think I'll let Debbie answer that call. I think that she has a great piece here to add on that. Debbie, can you share about your biggest challenge in times of in leadership during times of crisis?
So I thought about this question when I looked at it, like, what's been your biggest challenge during the pandemic? And really my answer to that is my biggest challenge has actually shifted as we've moved through these last 10 or 11 months. So I think at the start of the pandemic, my biggest leadership challenge was trying to figure out how to lead effectively when there was a real lack of information. And I was also just kind of stunned and had this disbelief that, is this really happening? And feeling like we were trapped in one of those bad, movies that we all watch where there's a pandemic sweeping the globe. So I think in the first couple of weeks, that led to some stall out. So that's kind of was my biggest challenge I had to grapple with. And then that rapidly shifted, I think, in the first few months to the biggest challenge being we had this avalanche of information and data coming at us that we needed to sift through and determine what was useful for our business community versus just turning around and avalanching on them. And so figuring out what was real, I think, as one of our other speakers mentioned, what was useful and what was impactful. So managing that overwhelming flow of information in the middle there was probably the biggest challenge. And then I would say in this last 2 to 3 months, I think the biggest challenge for me has been, I think we've all been realizing, wow, this is a long haul. We initially thought we were going to get over this in a couple, 3 months, and it's moving forward, and it's still a long haul because we're not done yet. And so really, personally experiencing some, I would say, mental fatigue, emotional fatigue, and realizing that others around me are also doing that. And so how do I work myself through that so that I in turn can lead from a hopeful perspective, I said have been my biggest challenge in the last 3 months. So it's shifted depending on where we've been at in the phase of this crisis.
Thank you. Mayor Snyder, what do you think?
Well, being
biggest
present,
challenge.
yeah, being present for me has been one of the biggest challenges. This isn't unique to me, but it's important. It's an important part of being mayor, and I was elected by the community, and I've got a responsibility to stay connected with the needs of our community, whether it's through pandemics, wildfires, or other events. What I would say is it's been, challenging to have meaningful conversations over Zoom or other platforms with, for example, someone who feels like they were treated unfairly by the police, or with a local business owner that doesn't feel like they can keep their doors open during COVID. Those are not, to me, I want to be present and in person there. And I've done my best to be present virtually and to be in person when possible and safe. This is included walking all of downtown with CEO Molehan the Saturday morning after the vandalism and destruction. And we made contact with a bunch of business owners and had a lot of good conversations. That was a moment where I felt like it was more important to be present. I have to balance safety and presence, and I felt like that was the right thing to do at that moment. I host a virtual community chat each month. Normally we did that in person. One of the benefits of having this now become a virtual event where I answer, any and all questions, is that it's allowed hundreds of people to join and or participate or watch later, where in the past it was the same 5, 10, 15 people that would come to, Symposium or Taforia or some other local business. And that would be the group that would get my attention and get their questions answered and tell me sometimes the same things they shared with me last month. And I would like to be able to get back to doing that too, but the virtual format has offered access to people who either didn't have the time, knowledge, or the situation to be able to attend in person. So I think that's been a little positive. I routinely share my email address and phone number at virtual events and in my monthly columns and during the campaign for mayor. So people call me. You all would probably be surprised by the number of citizens that just call me, and that's okay. That's what I want. But it also takes a fair bit of time and attention, and also some skill in fielding those calls. And sometimes, you get calls from people that have maybe less organized thought patterns than average. And so that's challenging too. Bottom line, I try to be present in person when possible. I did participate in the student-led Black Lives Matter March. I was present at Tigard Bowl, raising awareness for their struggles, and have continued to try to support them and other businesses when they've asked and or when I just know about it. And I try to be present by supporting our local businesses when it's, for a meal or shopping for the holidays or whatever. And while I'm present, and I think this is really important, it is, as a leader, it is really important to listen. I say this sometimes, and I'll say it now. We have two ears and one mouth, and I strongly believe we should be using them in that proportion. And I listen to understand. I listen so I can make the best possible decisions for our community and hopefully make all of your lives a little bit easier.
I appreciate that. And the other person that really comes to mind with is Dr. Sue. You know, those challenges, those pros and cons of technology. Can you share some about the challenges that you faced during this time?
Well, absolutely. I think the first challenge, and it's back to what is our North Star. Our North Star is that we are to educate all children well with rigor and relevance and engagement. And certainly the virtual stance has not been a good partner for that. And I would absolutely reinforce the messages relative to fatigue with the virtual platform. Our youngest learners, have adapted as best they can. Our teachers have been truly, and I hate this superlative, but I'm going to use it anyway, amazing in the sense of watching them transfer their in-classroom pedagogy to the virtual space. You haven't lived until you've watched a kindergarten teacher masterfully manage kindergartners online for over 30 minutes plus. And in several cases, I have observed a teacher teach literacy, math, social skills, and a little PE in 30 minutes with kindergartners and not lose a one. That is some serious chops when it comes to instruction. That all being said, I think we are, to the mayor's point, we are wired to be together. And so this has been part of our ongoing advocacy as conditions have shifted, and we've lived through one spike after another that has just put us out of reach from being able to start back into hybrid. Now with the latest set of revised metrics, it's been a constant, adjust and monitor, adjust and monitor, adjust and monitor all the way along the line. Now with the current set of metrics, we are forging ahead with limited in-person opportunities so that we can connect with those students across K-12. We are focused heavily to getting our elementary schools back up and running. Our soft target on that is in March. And we are pushing hard and have been successful, even though I realize it is a limited resource. But we are pushing hard relative to vaccines and supports from the state and the feds to make the conditions as safe as possible for everyone, so that we can bring students in, we can teach them, and we can stay in the classroom rather than have to shut down time and again simply because students or community have brought the disease into the building that require us to close that cohort down for 14 days. So again, it's this constant monitoring, adjusting, and being flexible, but always keeping your eye to what is it that we do. What we do is we educate. How do we do it? We need to be in front of you to do that and start to help our community transition back out of virtual and back into personal, while still being respectful of the fact of COVID is not yet done. And we have many, many months probably left to navigate as we work through that.
Thank you, Dr. Sue. Kevin, I'd love to chat with you because when I think about the business that you own here in Tigard, and I know you're in Sherwood as well, one of the reasons we wanted you on the panel today is because you face these challenges in the same way, but in a very less structured, a very much more community gathering, community trying to describe what the coffee shop is that's not just a business. It's not just a downtown Tigard location. So I'm really curious to hear from you. How have you navigated some of these challenges and staying connected to the community when they can make a choice to not be connected?
Well, I think that's two parts. There's still an in-person presence, and then there's a online presence that we have. So through this time, just innovatively, we've developed online connections and using I know you're going to talk about this probably a little later, the social media connection and stuff. So staying connected with our community has been a great challenge. A community meaning our customer base or Symposium community, those that frequent our coffee shop and our attenders of our facility. So we've had to pivot a lot. We've had to navigate through people's decisions. There will be people that stay with us and headstrong. They're going to be present. They're going to shop with us. They want to be here and they want to be here in person. And then there's those that are just going to change their shopping rhythms. Their life has changed, so therefore they're going to change the rhythm of how they do morning routines and afternoon routines or what have you, or their meeting routines. Just like the online platform is amazing and it is awesome, and I'll partner there with Jason that it does definitely reach out to more people with convenience and such, yet that online situation does threaten the in-person situation. So it's kind of a double-edged there that we're constantly trying to balance. How are we going to reach out to the people staying at home, and how do we effectively reach out to those that are coming to us? I think to address now the people that are coming to us live, in-person type shoppers or participants, I think one of the greatest challenges that we face is what most everyone is saying is fatigue, COVID fatigue. It's funny, we're all using kind of the same language because we're all dealing with similar challenges just in our different contexts. And it's a COVID fatigue. People are tired of it. People are tired of maybe staying at home. People are tired of the fear. People are tired of the unknown or the unknown future. What is tomorrow going to bring? Is the vaccine coming? Is it not coming? Those questions that people have definitely are a mental game. It's a mental fatigue that people endure, and it's hard. And one of the things that we've experienced, just to be honest, is people are very reactive. Crisis kind of taps into our suppressed immaturities. So we have, we're all immature in some sense. We haven't arrived to the 100% maturity as adults in every case. And so I call it coffee rage, we have road rage, which everyone's experienced, I'm sure, but we have coffee rage. So when the line is too long or people just are not getting exactly what they have gotten in the past, because of the changes that we've made or what we're able to offer, or you have to wear a mask when you come in, or you have, hand sanitizer at the front. We, for a while, didn't take cash. We only took cards. Now we're taking both. But when we only took cards, there was like a rage there. So all the changes that we've had to make, coupled with the stress of the crisis, definitely created kind of a cocktail of just disruption, created a cocktail of friction. When somebody would come in, they were irritated, they were unhappy, not necessarily with us, but just with the situation. So dealing with that reaction of people definitely affects our morale as a staff. And so what I'll call our staff COVID depression has kicked in. And so constantly trying to pull up and prop up our staff during this time because they're the ones that are navigating through people's reaction. They're the ones that are on the front counter of the shop. So they're the ones that are dealing with the everyday, how's this person going to respond? There's just a mire of challenges there that I think people have a low threshold right now for pain and more frustration, more crisis. They have a low frustration for just more. And as we are there for people that have lost their jobs or are going through a family crisis or going through a personal crisis, we've always been able to be there for people, present for people, and been able to navigate through and just be a listening ear for somebody, just to maybe a shoulder to cry on when they come in, like the bartender, they're just there, just spilling their guts. It's really hard to be there for people when we're all experiencing the same crisis and we're all experiencing different kinds of reactions. So some of our staff we've lost. They're just tired of it. I'm done. I need a different job. Some of our staff have really hung in there, but the constant conversation, probably once a week, is people are are tired of people's responses. It's hard not to get trapped in that. When somebody responds poorly to you, you respond poorly back. You know, it's kind of that fight, you know, mentality, or fight or flight. So we fight, right? When somebody responds. So it's hard to put on the customer service smile all the time when everyone is having really a low threshold of pain. I would say how I've navigated through that as a leader is I've just tried to be a hopeful, forward vision voice, that as we have, Dr. Seuss said it great, you know, that North Star, where we have a goal, we have a vision, we want to be a relational community, we want to be a relational business, even though it's hard to be relational 6 feet apart with a mask on, with hand sanitizer in your hand. It's hard to not shake hands, it's hard to not give a hug. We've done our best to be very present and relational, and that is our ultimate goal, to continue to be creative in the situation we've been given, and just to know that people are doing the very best that they can with what they've been given, and to have that grace, to have that sense of flexibility and grace with our approach has been really what I've been calling our staff to, and constant affirmation, building our staff up. And understanding that as an owner, I'm not here all the time, and I'm not right there in the mire all the time. And so I need to understand their situation, to have empathy for my staff, that as I go, well, why was that such a big deal? Or why is that so hard for you to deal with? Well, when you deal with 50 of those, it's hard to deal with the last one. You're just sick and tired of it. So I need to have empathy for what they're dealing with. And they're also afraid too, like during the heart of it, some of the biggest leadership challenges I had was really understanding our staff and their fears of COVID and their fears of the situation, because they were having also adverse reactions as well. So I think that that's probably just a lot of information. You know, I talked a lot there, but that's basically my summary of the question.
I think your points on reactivity and how we both are carrying ourselves, maybe as leaders, but also as people in the world, which really does, Cassandra, I'd love to hear from you. You kind of touched on that reactivity and how you guys are handling internally that kindness, caring for each other as you have to continue to go out and lead. And you know, just like your staff people, Kevin, behind the counter, they're leading the community with that bright face or that kindness. Cassandra, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. When Kevin was describing the barista's feelings, I think that all of our firefighters can relate to that as well, especially when it's 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, and you've been up all night. My husband is currently working at one of our busiest fire stations, and they don't ever sleep. And so your ability to give that compassionate care might be really strong, and your whole team might be feeling positive and helpful at 8 a.m. But by the time you've been up all night and it's 4 a.m., almost 24 hours later, it gets harder. And so, you know, our culture is really dependent on how we interact with each other. You drill together, you live together, you eat together, you go through tough times together. And this pandemic has removed a little bit of the abilities for all of our crews to interact and to have that pressure relief valve. And so we've had to be creative about affording that pressure relief valve for our crews so that they can get things off their chest, so that they're the best they can be when someone needs their help in 911. Also we've really leveraged our peer support teams so that not only do we have chief officers going out and interacting with our crews to take a pulse on how they're doing and when they need some relief that they, you know, might not otherwise need, because they're soaking up all that nervous energy in our community and they're feeling it themselves as well. So giving people permission to say, okay, you're not right now in the emotional state to be comforting to this person or to be able to give them the best care. Not to mention you're in a hazardous materials suit that really adds another barrier of your ability to show compassion and empathy and care for someone. So giving our personnel permission to ask for a break when they need a break, and having that peer support team and having even our mental health practitioners going and meeting in conjunction with our leadership team, with our crews, to let them know it's okay that you're feeling this way. And we're going to get you some help and get you a little bit of relief so that you can regroup to provide that care. So that has been a real challenge. And we'll continue to deal with it, right? Because even though, you know, we're starting to see vaccines, it's going to be a long road ahead, right? And even in the fire stations, folks are still going to have to wear masks and having those conversations to remind folks that we got to stick with it. We've got to get through this together. And the only way for us to get through it together is to, you know, to be patient. I appreciated what Kevin was saying as well, just about that grace and that poise. That's sometimes hard to do when everybody's tuckered out, but we're trying to do more and more of that. We started out in the beginning of this pandemic with daily briefings above and beyond our regular briefings, but again, constantly communicating and letting folks know that we're going to get through it together. So you've all stated everything else very well, but as far as pivoting, we've just had to really do more of what we know works, but not be creative about it when we can't do it all face to face.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for what you've shared so far. I'm going to do a little bit of a summary. We've got about 10 minutes left. This is one of those meaty topics that, you know, it's hard to really get to, but what is so exciting about pulling all of you together and why we're very thoughtful in who we invited to come and speak today is because there is so much commonality. We can talk about challenges probably all day and find things that are similar and different, but what I'm really hearing across all of your community spaces, the leadership that's working includes hope, flexibility and adaptation, trust, courage, and empathy, partnership and communication. That's internal and external for all of those pieces. So these last few minutes, here's what I'm wondering if we can do. I would love to hear just briefly, because I find it seems to come up very often here at the Chamber, comes up often with community leaders, is social media. Could you briefly let us know how has social media either impacted your capacity to lead effectively or hindered it? And then I'd love for you to do one more thing, which is I would love for our community to be able to leave this conversation today with something a little bit actionable. So would you share with us, if you don't mind, what leadership pieces are you going to take forward with you? If there's anything you're leaving behind, that's fine. But out of this crisis time, tell us, what are you taking with, what has worked for you or you're taking forward with you? So it'll be talk to us about social media, what you like or don't like about it, and how it's impacting you. And then of course, how are you moving forward? And I'd love to start with Mayor Snyder.
Well, social media has allowed the city to connect with residents and provide key messaging about the pandemic, wildfires, and the available resources to help. It's made it so that we can do that, I think, more effectively than if you think about what things would have been like if all of these events happened 25 years ago. Our ability to connect, it would have just been much slower and much more time consuming and problematic to get accurate and prompt messaging. We've had a more captive audience with people stuck at home and frankly bored to some extent. Without social media, it would have been impossible for me to continue my fireside chats during the global pandemic. And as I've stated earlier, we reach hundreds of people in those when they're online, and 5 to maybe 20 at max in the in-person format. The city has also, and this is an interesting point I will make, the city's been forced to engage in two-way dialogue online and in social media. In the past, our staff in particular, I didn't necessarily view it this way, but our staff typically viewed social media as sort of a one-way message pushing type of approach because of their role as a city. And I'd been pushing for this change for a period of time, and there'd been some change, but 2020 forced their hand in a way that I don't think anyone could have anticipated. As far as things and tips I plan to continue or ditch in the coming year, you know, my New Year's resolution for 2021 was to help the entire Tigard community thrive coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I mean that seriously. That's a kind of an audacious goal, but I think it's good for me to dream and to strive for that. We will thrive by ensuring that every member of the community continues to have their basic services met. And so we've worked with, partners like Just Compassion and Packed with Pride to make sure that happens. We're going to continue to try to help the community thrive by fostering a healthy business community. We had a lot of success I talked about earlier with our business assistance programs, promoting businesses through the Shop Tigard campaign, and we're not done with that. And so, helping our local business community thrive and flourish is also really important to us. We'll also thrive by continuing to evaluate our public safety practices. We need to ensure that our police department and our public safety practices reflect the values of our community. And that's really important to the entire city council and to me personally. And I would just, as I state my last thing here, I will remind everyone that I am available, both at my email address is pretty public and my cell phone number, 503-810-0269. And I take calls from everyone. So people are surprised when they get me on the other end, but it's really me.
Thank you, Mayor Snyder. Cassandra, can I put you on the spot? We'd just love to hear about how has social media helped or hindered your capacity as in a leadership role? And then are there any specific strategies that you're taking into 2021?
You bet. So it's helped us a lot. And we felt it was we were responsible for trying to share some of the safety messages in a way that wasn't too patriarchal or too patronizing, right? There's a lot of folks, especially in the beginning, that were politicizing things like mask use. And so we wanted to have, the presence of the uniform, the fire service personnel, just to emphasize the good things and that we're all in it together to try to incentivize or at least model for our community what we can all do to help each other get through this. So we did that both on social media and in mass media in the very early stages to emphasize, the physical distancing, we're all in it together. So it's been very beneficial for us from that standpoint. I don't know that we will change much about it except for wanting to continue to amplify that. And then we've tried to tell some good stories, especially on our partners in law enforcement, because, so much of this past year has vilified law enforcement or, has put that in a negative light. And we see the good work that our law enforcement partners are doing every single day, whether that's because they've just defibrillated someone with an AED. So trying to use our role to tell good stories about what our people that we partner with in the community are doing that are good, that make us all feel good. So I think we'll just keep trying to do that in this next year. There have been some challenges just as far as social media, not for our organization, but that have challenged us from a leadership perspective on our people on their own social media, right? And just kind of reminding folks that we have a higher mission as public servants and that we need to make sure that we're comporting ourselves on the clock and off the clock, in the station and out of the station in a certain way. And that has required some emphasis from a leadership perspective about those expectations. We have amazing people, but this has been an especially emotional year and really just trying to emphasize that responsibility that we all share. So I think that we'll keep trying to do that good work and keep trying to offer the bright spots that we can. And, even the events that we've done, we've tried to get creative, whether it's birthday parades, honoring, folks, trying in the way that we can be present with those, big red cheerful fire trucks to bring a little bit of joy when everyone's experiencing so much collective stress.
Thank you, Cassandra. Dr. Sue, can you give us some of your insights on social media and then what specific strategies you might be taking forward?
Thanks so much, Catherine. And yes, again, I would leverage off of all that's been said previously. In terms of social media, one of the things that TTSD has had the opportunity to do, and it's because I have an amazing communications director and community relations person in Director Rose, but really diversifying the social media platforms. We use Instagram, we use Twitter, we use a number of platforms, updating our website, coordinating communications internally so that we have a new flow where administrators get information on Thursday, staff get it on Friday after administrators have the full information, and then community following that, in addition to a community blog that gives ongoing information. And what we've learned is that one size doesn't fit all. We've also stood up through our student success dollars that the state has provided to us, we have stood up a network of family affinity groups, because we know that they're, in terms of equity and hearing all voices, that we know that some groups, particularly those that are historically underserved, are not likely to use the channels that the predominant community members of a community are. And so these are more intimate spaces where people can still share their lived experience and their concerns, and we can gather it, but it doesn't necessarily create an environment where they feel outed in some respects. And so that has been very powerful for us and will continue. And on the theme of what we will carry forward, all of that will come forward as we come back into brick and mortar. But I'm also very much mindful, this is one of those situations, the first time in over a 20-year career as an administrator, where my email is really running one-to-one. One saying you should have been in school in December, and the other saying don't you dare come into school. And it's just, it's literally neck and neck. And so I know that as we move people into brick and mortar in the fall, that I will need to attend to the fact we will need to provide that continued online experience for those who just yet have not dealt with all of the stress and probably post-traumatic stress that will come from having lived through this pandemic and have heightened concerns. So continued diversification of our social media platforms, continued ways to refine those and hone the message based on feedback that we're getting, as well as offering two platforms, continuously platforms, in terms of instruction for those who will feel safer doing that, as well as getting back to some sense of normalcy relative to in-person learning and in-person opportunities for sports and activities and all the things that make for a very rich public education experience.
Thank you, Dr. Sue. And I will just say, as a TTSD parent, your capacity to utilize social media is off the charts when it comes to communication.
Well, thank you. I'm hopeful Director Rose heard that.
I'll send her an email. Kevin, will you share with us, you mentioned social media. I know you have done a lot with social media, and from a business owner's perspective, I would love to hear on that. And then, of course, which strategies did you find you're absolutely going to take forward into 2021?
Thank you, Catherine. I didn't take social media before 2020 very seriously. I'm 48 years old, and Instagram is just not in my history. It's not in my repertoire of go-to. So I really struggled with social media before last year. Last year was the first time I actually embraced it fully. I hired a social media coach, actually, for our business. Her name's Nicole Johansson. I'll give her a little plug there. She's excellent. She's an influencer. She's helped us tremendously with our social media. And this is what she said about our social media. I asked her this question, this very question. She said, it has given the business a platform and a voice where we can lead with hope, love, and acceptance in how we serve our customers, how we treat others, and how we support other businesses in our community. And I'll just leave it with that. We've done a lot with social media. We've used it strategically. She's taught us a lot, and I have a lot more to learn with how to use it. But it is a social science, and there is a lot to it. And I'm just in the learning mode still. But we took it seriously. That's the strategy that I use. I need to take this seriously and embrace it fully, and get over my 48-year-oldness. Going forward, I think that there's three ways that we can come out of this pandemic. We can come out of it disciplined, we can come out of it lazy, or we can make really poor decisions. So either disciplined, lazy, or poor decisions. And that's kind of a meme joke that's going around right now, is how is the pandemic affecting you, and what is your reaction? What's your response to it? So I just stole that from someone else. I think going forward is discipline for me. 2020, Debbie Molehan gave me the opportunity to be a part of a group that evolved into another group through Goldman Sachs, the investment firm. I went through their 10 KSB program, and I was able to develop in 2020 a comprehensive growth plan that's huge for our company and gives us a very, very crystallized vision. As Dr. Sue said, a North Star, very crystal clear North Star for us. And so going forward in that discipline of a growth plan, that's where I want to be, that's where we need to be, and that's what I'm carrying forward. I've seen a lot of businesses in my sector be soft in their business practices or making poor decisions. And I have abandoned poor decisions, abandoned lazy thinking, and moved right towards disciplined thinking and behavior. And that growth plan has certainly helped me do that. So that's my contribution, how we're moving forward and what I can say about that with that question. I'm ditching everything like that's lazy thinking or poor decisions. I'm ditching all that and moving towards a positive of disciplined thinking and crystal clear vision.
Yeah. And Kevin, if I can say on behalf of some of us here at the Chamber, at least myself, it's been really exciting to watch you go through that experience and see you implement those things.
Thank you.
I wanted to end, we're right at time. I really wanted to end with Debbie Molehan, CEO of the Tigard Chamber, because as her staff, I have watched Debbie in this really beautiful role as both a catalyst, a convener for the business community and the community at large. And when we put these questions together, we didn't really know we were going to get back on that social media question. And what I'm so happy about is what I heard is it was really utilized as an opportunity. It wasn't seen as much of a challenge. There are challenges with social media, but I heard so much opportunity from each of you, increasing connections, sharing messages of safety, embracing, capitalizing and diversifying social media, which is just so thrilling to hear. And then in addition, when it comes to leadership, what I'm really hearing from you all is your themes of focusing on thriving, modeling for our community by acknowledging the incredible power that each of our organizations have in being trusted by the public. And I just appreciate that so much, Cassandra. Of course, focusing on hope, sharing of truth, and being reliable, as well as empathy and compassion. So Debbie, I would love to end with you today to sort of ask you your thoughts on the social media piece. How has it been as a leader? And then of course, what strategies are you going to take forward in the 2021 year?
Sure, thank you, Catherine. I would say in general, social media really helped us because it gave us, we've had, used a lot of different social media platforms, but obviously we expanded into Zoom, we added StreamYard, we leveraged our YouTube more. So what I saw was as we were needing to push information out to our business community, not everybody does email, not everybody does Facebook. It gave us multiple ways to connect with the business community to get them information that they needed. The other benefit I have seen of social media is it's given us the ability to do broader collaboration and partnership. So we've been able to do things that we've never done before, like these online panels, for example, and we, have done those throughout the pandemic and did that successfully. And things that we might, like somebody's clear across town, we might not have brought them in for a panel or something like that. So I just view it as really very expansive. On the challenging side, I would say when there have been these touch points where we've had some sort of social unrest or political unrest, and we as a business organization have felt like we needed to say something about that and make a statement, because social media can go viral and because, things can be misconstrued. What I saw us doing was taking several hours to craft what on the surface might look like a really simple 3 to 5 sentence statement. And for us, since we're a nonprofit, that could include vetting it with our board. So being really, really careful to find that right balance of empathy, truth, being helpful because we want to be part of the solution, and having heart. And then I think the last thing I've discovered with social media is it has a really broad reach. So sometimes I think we reach to that tool like, oh, this is the best way to get the word out. And what I discovered recently when we had our issue with the protest and the damage that happened in downtown Tigard, we needed to communicate rather quickly with impacted or the business community that could potentially be impacted as we learned from the police department this was coming. And we chose not to use social media because we needed to really target our message, and we didn't necessarily need a whole bunch of other people knowing about what we were supporting and telling our business community to do. So I feel like you have to be very careful with social media. It's a really good tool at times, and other times there's a better tool in your arsenal. In terms of what I will take forward, I think continuing the transparency with staff and really increasing the collaboration with my team to help build the bench to answer challenging questions. So what I've been doing the last several months is, Deb's not the only one that can answer that question from a community member or a business member. My team is perfectly capable. They've been going on this journey with me. So I want to continue that because that helps our organization scale and we can be much more nimble and responsive to our member base. And I think going forward, the other thing I want to do is really work on establishing good rhythms for my team between rest and work. Because when you're in a crisis, I think as Cassandra talked about, you're just like, go, 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 go. We got to fix this. This needs to happen. But if you're not allowing for that rest, then you're not making maybe the best decision. You might not be reacting in the best way to a situation that happens. So those would be my two go forward things.
Well, thank you so much. I love that you mentioned sustainable practices in there at the end. I know Kevin has talked a ton about sustainability, and that goes across the gamut in your business. I want to thank everyone for being here today. We're a few minutes over on time. We don't have any questions, but if people are curious, this is live on Facebook. This will also go in our webinar library, and they can certainly reach out here at the chamber, and we can put you in touch with the appropriate parties if you have a question. So yeah, thank you all so much. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a great day.